Today we're wanting to see if there's any chance this little LX3310 can handle this brush mulcher. Let's get started. A viewer told me I needed to put some bolts in here to keep this ROPS from shaking. He was right. I'll get on that. Now the area of trees that we're working on here are too big for my brush mowers. I've already mowed all I'm willing to mow of these particular sprouts, and they've grown too, I suppose, a little bit. So I'm not willing to use a brush mower on them. There'll be some commenters say, well, my brush mower will do that. Well, yours may. My brush mower, the TS10 that we have, is not rated for the really big stuff, you know, the 4 and 5 inch stuff. It's rated at about 2 inches, I believe. And so I've really done all I'm comfortable doing with that. I find that this machine is much better suited for these bigger sprouts. When you're watching on camera, I realize you can't really get a good handle on how big a brush like this is. It's also difficult to see how steep a hill is. There's just certain things we have a very difficult time showing you, but hopefully some of this description can help get those points across.
We have some really good footage today of this mulcher in action. The sun was just right and the leaves aren't on the trees yet, so we get some good views. We also took the time to mount the GoPro in some unique locations. So we're going to show you some more, or maybe a little longer, action shots than we sometimes do in our videos.
Lost a bolt out of the top of the SMB emblem.
I chose to wear my IsoTunes Link over the ear hearing protection today. You guys are probably saying I chose it because it's orange. Well, maybe that's part of it, but I have noticed that I really like the protection that it provides, but I don't think I want to wear it when it's 90 plus degrees outside. It's pretty nice to wear on a 50-degree day like this. On hot days, it gets my ears pretty hot, and nobody wants burning ears, right? In any case, I appreciate you supporting the channel by buying IsoTunes. Get $10 off any style at isotunesaudio.com/TTWT and use code TTWT.
This mulcher has proven to be quite a load for these little compact tractors, the M-Cut size. It's rated at up to 50 horsepower, and it can use every bit of that. I found that when I'm going backwards into the brush for the first time, I want to keep this machine off the ground a little bit. Keep that main rotating head maybe 6 to 8 inches off the ground, and that keeps me from pulling those sprouts all the way under the tractor and sometimes getting them wrapped up around the business end of the machine. So I found that if I go backwards that first time 6 or 8 inches, then I can let it down as I come back forward. And, you know, I get the same job done, but it seems to work a little easier that way. Another thing I believe we're seeing, based on my little bit of activity here so far, as well as our previous work with the 3039R, when we had my friend Kevin here, I believe the trees work better in the wintertime. So that's probably one lesson that's good for everybody watching. If you want to try to do some brush mulching like this, it works a lot better in the winter. Once the leaves get on, the sap goes back down for spring, it seems to pull a lot harder to do these little trees. One other thing I'm noticing is you have to have a little patience to get a good cleanup job. I just keep going over it. That first time or two after you go over it, you don't get a lot of it really mulched up very fine. So first I'm knocking down the trees 6 or 8 inches high, as I said. Then I'm getting all the rest of those stobs down to ground level, and then I'm just going over the whole thing, maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe even 4 more times to try to get rid of some of this little underbrush, the leftover pieces that it just didn't get mulched up in the first try. If you have enough patience and you go over it several times, it's entirely mowable, even with a small brush mower after you do this. I was thinking that the right-hand side here was a little bit lower than the left. So I was trying my fancy ratchet and lift on here. That is really nice. A nice option. Let's see if it worked.
I know you're all wanting an evaluation of this LX3310, and I do understand your excitement. I'm just not prepared to do so yet. This is my first real project with the tractor. I don't really count that snow removal job in West Virginia. The tractor was ill-equipped for that particular job. And anyway, we want to get some experience under our belt before we start spouting off some opinions. Don't really have many yet. It's doing the job here today on this with no problem at all. I did find some differences during the hookup process. I'll share some of those in a later episode after I ask some questions and learn more about them. But this is why we bought the machine rather than just a short-term loan. We'd like to have some real familiarity rather than just a surface-level knowledge. So be patient with us. We'll get to more in-depth reviews as we go on in time here, but for now we're just going to try to use the machine and get comfortable with it.
I believe all these are cut off, so...
Now this mulcher is from Baumalight. It's an MP348. You can get it at shopgreendealer.com/TTWT. Use code TTWT for a 5% discount. Now it may show up as out of stock. That's no worry. Just call the folks at shopgreendealer.com and they'll get you set up. As you use an attachment like this, there are a lot of different techniques that need to be learned. I talked earlier about how high I use the attachment when backing into new brush, but at this point I'm beginning to try to think about how to keep from getting brush all over the tractor. It's natural, for me at least, to want to back in a full length, sort of like you can see here where I just keep backing alongside of the uncut brush. Since the attachment is not quite as wide as the tractor, that ends up making brush lean on the tractor or maybe potentially scratch it or at least get into my face. I'm beginning to learn here that rather than a straight line, just going backwards in a straight line, if I'll go at a little bit of an arc, such that the front end of the tractor is always leaning outward, almost a semicircle here as I go around the brush, it works a lot better. I'm always backing in toward the brush, but the front end of the tractor is out in an open space. The video may not illustrate that technique very well as I'm still experimenting and learning, but that's part of the fun, right?
Well, I finally killed it. it just gets wrapped around there, and not much I can do at that point.
I decided to come around here to the other side and back in toward the sun. I thought maybe you'd get some better visualization of what's going on inside that beater. This really is an amazing tractor attachment, at least in my opinion. I'm not sure of any other attachment for such small tractors could get this job done. The closest I could think of would be the Brown tree cutter. However, it looks to me that their smallest size is a 5 foot, and it recommends 60 to 100 horsepower, so would require a much larger tractor than this. And while I'd love the opportunity to try one, I'm kind of thinking it might leave some stobs or little stumps that might be harder to deal with, whereas this mulcher will take them right to the ground. Maybe we'll get an opportunity to play with one sometime, who knows. Now here's an example of me going around that semicircle I'm talking about, keeping the front end of the tractor away from the brush. I think with a little more planning as I go, I could do that a lot more effectively.
Well, it's a lot more pleasant doing this time of year than it is when it's really hot, for a few reasons. One is I can wear a coat, and without a cab, if I've got my hand and arm back here, it wants to slap up on me sometimes. I wish I had some slow-mo to see what's really going on, but it seems like when it gets wrapped around that main beater there, it slaps all the way up and hits me in the hand, which is kind of weird. I mean, I don't see how it could do that, but I think it is somehow. I don't think we could have come out here a day earlier. Yesterday, I think would have been too wet. It's just borderline too wet today. We're making a little bit of rut. And I don't want to rut this up very bad. I rutted it up a little bit last year, early on there at one point, and you know, it just makes it hard to mow all summer. So I want to try to avoid that as much as I can. And this was just about perfect. The little tractor here worked fine on it. You have to be patient with this situation. You can't, you can't just go in there with all your might and expect a little tractor like this to handle it. I wouldn't want to do 5 acres of this every day. In fact, I wouldn't want to do 5 acres in a single day, I don't believe. I would more recommend this for a long-term, I'm going to clean up my property over a series of months or a series of years even. I think that's the purpose for this. That beats the idea of a single day rental. If you've got one area that needs to be cleaned up, probably a single day rental on a skid steer might be a better approach. But if you want to use this thing a little bit on the long term, I think this makes good sense. This whole combination here would be less than half the price of a skid steer with a mulcher. So you know, if you were trying to buy, there's a reason for this. I get a lot of comments about the going backwards and how, well, I wouldn't want to go backwards. Well, I didn't notice it too much today. Again, I don't think I'd want to do 5 acres of it, but for the amount that I did here, it really wasn't any problem. You don't have to look really close. So just kind of getting a glimpse of how high you're cutting and the general direction you're going. So I didn't have to be turned around, you know, totally turned around to be able to see a really good look of the whole unit. Well, it's definitely a beautiful day, and I'm so happy that spring's almost here. We'll have a lot more projects coming up, guys. I'm sorry, I just wasn't going to get out when it was 0 or, you know, a foot of snow other than to remove the snow. I don't have that much motivation. We'll get a bunch of projects going now. We've got several things in mind we're working on, so hang with us on that. I do hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time on Tractor Time with Tim.